All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. This is the Ask Me Anything session about GitLab Releases. My name is Marin Jankowski, and I'm the Senior Engineering Manager in the Infrastructure Department and current interim Engineering Manager for Delivery. And delivery team is responsible for all of our GitLab releases, deployments to gitlab.com, and also the current Kubernetes migration we have on gitlab.com. All right, that was an intro that I rehearsed. I hope you all liked it. Awesome, thank you. Thanks for the thumbs up. I see that Phil is not going to be able to join and asked us to record. So this is being recorded, Phil. I'll share the recording after I finish processing it. Does anyone want to be Phil and ask questions so I can answer?
I could be Phil.
Let's go for it then.
Unless you were planning on being Phil. I don't want to ruin the prep that you've done.
I had a similar question to Phil, so I thought I would channel Phil and
be my guest,
bring some. Great. After an MR is merged to master, how do we know when the change will be deployed to gitlab.com, especially in that last week before the kind of like release cutoff, and where there's this ruling that for an MR to be in the release, it has to be on gitlab.com by a certain time. Just can you run through that process again? I know it's documented in the handbook, but
sure,
verbalizing it would be great, and just reiterating it for me. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. This like having it written down is completely different to actually running through it. There's like a lot of nuance that you cannot catch in documentation. So I know that everyone is impatient when their merge request goes into master because they think their job is now done, which is not even close. So we currently have, documented in our handbook, we currently have the cadence of 2 deployment branches a week. What does that actually mean? That means that 2 times a week, we go into master and branch off from a last known passing build. And then that is gonna be our deployment branch for the next couple of days until we get new deploy branch created. Multiple reasons for that. Some of them are related to the fact that we still don't have a really great story when it comes to how do we do QA? We don't have enough confidence in what we actually deployed in all of our environments prior to production. And we also need some time to turn around the fix when we get an S1, so high severity issue. So in order to kind of balance a lot of manual things that we have in general in our process and safety, we decided to go with 2 deploy branches a week. That actually means that everything you've merged between, so for example, one of the deployments we have is on Sunday. So that means that everything from previous deploy branch, which is created on Wednesday, until Sunday is being collected, and that's being deployed let's say Monday, but it is depending on your time zone. It is Sunday evening, basically. And then also everything from Sunday evening that time until Wednesday is being deployed in the second part of the week. This way we kind of balance the coverage also that we have, because we have to think about gitlab.com and how that gets deployed. So in order for you to know exactly when this is going to be deployed, we also have to have a stable platform. Like, it's basically impossible for us right now to tell you exactly when things are going to be deployed, because we have time that it takes for CI pipeline to pass in GitLab Rails, time it takes for a package to build, time it takes for us to deploy on staging, time it takes for the QA to pass on staging, again, time for canary deployment, QA again, and then time for production deploy. In any of those steps, things can go wrong, and things can get significantly delayed. For example, we might have CI pipeline failing in the deployment branch for known or unknown reason, right? That automatically means someone needs to go in and fix that spec failure. We can see a QA failure in Canary while we had the same QA pass in staging, right? The reason for that is completely different data sets that we have on our Canary environment and in production. So because of that, it is really hard to say that we have a cutoff. That's why I'm fighting really hard against the cutoff, because cutoff actually means everyone will be running under a radar, and then it becomes someone else's responsibility to ensure that this actually gets deployed and actually works on GitLab.com. Did I answer your question somewhat?
Yeah, yes, you did. Let's assume that all of that is fine, and we're not so stressed about the date. I want to confirm, I have seen labels added to the merge requests recently, which indicates when it's been deployed to staging and Canary. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And
so there are a couple of things that we are trying to do. Sorry if you don't mind. There are a couple of things that we are trying to do from our side to make sure that the visibility of when something lands in any of the environment is clearer. So one of the things we added was in the merge request widget, you have that block that shows which environment we've deployed to. That is actually correct up until a second, right? Like as soon as we finish a deployment in one of the environments, we have an API call that we trigger for each of the merge requests that we just deployed, and we add a link between what we deployed and that merge request. So that's one item. And at the same time, we also use the workflow labels to propagate one of the merge requests between environments. So you will see workflow staging, that means it's deploying on staging. Workflow Canary in Canary, and so on. So it gets added at the same time that we'd add that information in the MR widget.
Thanks. I don't know if this was full as well, so I'll carry on reading. It says, by the way, really like this and chat ops. Great for finding out after the fact, and it was linked to an issue merge which shows the deployment environment, which is exactly what you just spoke about. Yes.
Yeah, so this was basically us communicating the changes we are making. It actually allows people to discuss things and also has a bit more of a context than a documentation part might have. The chat ops part, I don't know if this audience knows it, but I think I'm going to share just so I can show you if your developers don't know. So we have a regular process that is defined in how do you use chat ops to enable feature flags, for example. That is very important for a lot of you. Because it allows you to create a feature that might not be fully ready and like experiment a bit and so on. But as part of that, we've also introduced basically an audit log. So this is linked in our documentation, but I don't know if you're all aware, where every interaction with chat ops and feature flags is logged in this project. And we know exactly at which time, who and which host things got triggered in. And this is the information it gives us. Like it also tells us which group it was enabled on, right? Like at exactly which time, who was the person triggering the thing. And this way we can quickly backtrack in case we have a problem on production or a problem in any of the environments to find out who was responsible for what, because it gets really difficult to track those things otherwise. Yeah, just wanted to share that related to chat ops.
So I'll speak to my commenter question. So I think the labels are fantastic. I've used those a lot to track progress, to aid in conversation, just to make sure the verification is taking place. But I'm wondering how we can get notified to some extent. I know there were comments that were creating notifications, but that was creating a lot of noise. Are you guys thinking of other ways to approach that?
Yeah, so we were originally thinking of just creating a to do this. So GitLab to highlight when something was done. But some of our engineers were saying that that's actually not really actionable. The fact that something moved to any of the environment, what do I do with that information? I might need to verify, but I might not need to do that. So developers are divided. I'll tell you that the comments that we were leaving, we used to leave at the same time we were applying the label. We used to leave a comment saying this merge request is now on this environment, right? But that created so much noise, and I don't think anyone was a fan of that. So if you have a better suggestion on how we can actually do that and make it an actionable item, happy to discuss that. But for now, we've kind of abandoned the idea of doing a proactive notification and in favor of the MR widget and the label. So if you actually want to track something, you have you can create an issue board where you can track within your team how certain things are going between different workflow labels and track it that way.
That's exactly what we're doing right now, and I think a lot of other teams are as well. It's just a bit passive. And it's like a topic that we'll add to our one-on-one check-ins just to make sure we're covering those verification stages. I think to-do is on point. That's where I was thinking as well, but I agree with your point. It's going to be noisy for everybody differently.
I mean, if we decide as a company that this is a direction we want to take, then a bit of noise for people that don't necessarily want the noise, we'll have to live with that, right? But we also always have to wonder whether this type of feature actually also helps out our self-managed and other customers, right? This is the hard balance that we have to keep on doing, because some of these things that we implemented outside of GitLab mostly because there was literally no interest from any of our customers to have a feature like that. So we don't want to introduce something that we will have to all maintain, but in the end, no one will use. And some of the things usually go down the route of, well, we need it for GitLab Inc. We'll add it. The customer comes in and says, I don't need it. Can I get a configuration option? And then we add a configuration option, which means now we have to maintain configuration options and maintain the feature, and it becomes just a bit too much.
Understood. Thanks for all your thoughts on this.
Yeah, of course. And there was that announcement that we made. I don't know if we followed up with an issue on that. So Neil, if you want to go through that and see whether an issue was created, so we can see whether product might have changed their minds to include some of this.
Yeah, happy to do that. Thanks.
There's a last statement here from Phil. When should we use pick into auto deploy?
Yep, great question. So you remember my intro with 2 deployment branches and so on, right? We kind of needed those deploy branches to be our stabilization period. So we catch any outstanding issues that our test coverage didn't catch in time. We have sometimes situations where we see an S1 or S2 bug, so severity 1 or 2 bug, which impacts a lot of our customers. But throughout the whole process, no test failed, meaning our unit test passed, our QA test passed, our environments where we have some of this artificial traffic generated also didn't expose an issue, but only when we reached production, we saw a problem because there was a workflow in a certain way on GitLab.com that someone is using that we were hitting, and we only saw it there. So in order to be able to react to those things quickly and have a stabilization period, so to speak, we have this pick into auto deploy label that always checks for existence of S2 and S1 labels. So if there is an issue, a bug that had that severity and pick into auto deploy was applied to merge request, our automated system will go through those labels, automatically pick them in deployment branch, and roll them out to all of our environments. That is exactly when you should be using them. So bug regression, S1 and S2 fixes. Anything lower than that has lower priority and lower urgency. And can usually wait additional 2 days to get into any of our environments. We are working on, this week actually, we are experimenting on creating deploy branches once a day. And that's going to be like a huge impact on everyone, regardless of how it goes. And that would make the pick into auto deploy label less interesting anyway for anyone. But the major problem we have is the fact that we still have to wait for manual. So we click a button to deploy to production because we need to get an approval from SRE on call whether we can promote to production. So we now are working on getting some data from our metrics, the metrics that we collected, so Sentry exceptions, Prometheus, and so on, to automatically inform decisions on whether we can go to production or not. So be more metrics driven. But this is just an experiment for now. So pick it into auto deploy remains necessary for those S1s and S2s. Need 1 second to let my cat out because he's driving me nuts. All right, did I answer a question?
Yes, I'm sure Phil will also be happy with that answer. Phil's got the next one, so I'll go for that as well. For self-managed releases, who determines and when whether to create a patch release after this 20-second based on pick into 12.10 label? And as EMs, what criteria should we use deciding whether to use any pick into X labels?
Yeah. So for self-managed releases, release managers are the ones responsible for deciding when a patch release goes out. The reason for that is that release managers know whether we have other releases in motion. So we have a special type of patch release, which I'm sure all of you are painfully aware of, which is a security patch release. Those are really, really disruptive and cause a number of departments to work together, which is a challenge. And then we also have possible deployments going on GitLab.com, possible exceptions there. Like there are a couple of things happening at the same time. So the criteria that the release managers use usually to decide on whether we are creating a patch release is how many fixes need to go into a patch release, right? Like how many merge requests are there already with the pick into auto deploy label? Then what is the severity of those bugs that we are trying to fix? So if we go through, let me try to open that page real quick and show something. It's easier to probably explain. All right, I'm gonna share my screen real quick. Come on, Brave. All right, so this is the group level view for GitLab org. If we take a look at pick into 12.10, which is our current stable release, we have 6 open pick into merge requests. So open, that means they're not ready yet. We have 13 merged. If we take a look at the list we have here, I, as a release manager, am looking at severity here. So something that is a high priority, but then low severity is not gonna move my dial one way or another. Something that is very high severity and priority will, like something like this, S2 and P1. If we have more of these type of merge requests merged, and we have no ongoing release, we are making a decision on the spot to create patch releases. So customer impact is important here. How much of an impact does this have on the customers? What else do we have in flight? How many other merge requests are open waiting for this release? We don't want to create too many patch releases because that slows down our customers. Now, our customers don't really want to upgrade every single time we create a release. So we kind of have to balance the number with everything else that is in flight there. Does that help?
We'll have to wait for Phil to say whether it helped, but yes, it was a script. I just wanted to quickly ask, I saw there was a couple of MRs that had multiple pick into releases. Is that because we're supporting multiple past versions of GitLab still?
No, so backports to older releases than the current stable one are not supported. So we only do that for security patches. So security patches are the only releases that we do where we backport to 2 other older releases. So we have a 3-month support policy for those. Whoever labeled that merge request that has like a couple of pick into labels is basically betting on us maybe having an event where we have to create something for an older release. But I'll tell you that happens maybe once a year, if that. So we usually kind of limit very strictly for patch releases for the current stable release and security patch releases for a 3-month period that we have in our maintenance policy. Let me link you the maintenance policy as well in the. And Daniel is being awesome and taking all the notes. Daniel, thank you so much. I see that you were a CEO shadow at some point.
That's where we get that from for sure.
So I linked the maintenance policy. You can all check out where we describe some of these definitions. We describe what goes in where, why we can do some backports and can't, and some upgrade recommendations in general that we have for our customers.
Cool, thank you. Chase, you're up next.
Thank you. Let's see. So I just wanted to extend the previous question just a little bit. Like, I think that I'm new sort of to some of these release management experiences. We had like a security, or not a security, but we had like a regression issue that flowed through recently. And both it was my first time going through this and also the engineer who was responsible. And so I think we were both kind of not surprised, but like curious, like about the timing of both like when the patch release was being opened and also like when it's, I think you kind of touched on a little bit of like when it's being closed. We had like multiple MRs that we were trying to all package up and get picked into the same patch release, but then we're surprised that that release had already been closed. And maybe if you could just, you talked about it a little bit, but just expand on that some, and then kind of maybe some guidance about like, when should we be doing this? Should we like be labeling as soon as we know, or what? For helpful for those who are managing that process. Thank you. Yeah.
So great question, Chase, and I'm fully understanding of why this question is coming up. By the sheer fact that we tied in our software shipping, right, like the self-managed release with SaaS deployment, we're kind of combining 2 of the hardest things in software, right? And with the timing I explained, it means that there is a vacuum there where things can happen, where, for example, you might have thought that we deployed it on GitLab.com, but there was an event that you're completely unaware of and you don't necessarily need to be aware of, where we had to make a decision of we are going to ship something that was deployed earlier rather than later. So that's what creates this vacuum. So basically, what I'm in the release page in the handbook, I'm trying to explain that as if you have things merged early in the cycle, or early in the monthly cycle, there is very little reason for you to apply a pick into label for the current release you're targeting, right? So if we are talking about, let's use the example of 22nd this month. So 22nd May of this month, our active preparation is for GitLab 13. Our stable release is 12.10, right? So if you're working on a feature or a bug fix or something that is related to 13.0, and you're merging it right now, there is no reason for you to think about picking to 13.0 label, right? If you're fixing a bug that was already introduced in 12.10, it's a bug, it's a regression, and it has certain severity, you want to ship it in 12.9 so that our customers can leverage it, then you apply the picking to 12.9 label. Now, if we get closer to the release date of 22nd of May, say we are at 18th of May, and we are almost there with getting GitLab 13 ready. Depending on how stable GitLab.com deployments were up until that moment, we might be still going out and deploying all of the fixes that you're merging even on the 18th, right? So basically, based on what is in your MR widget, what is on in your label in your merge request, you can actually see whether your merge request is going to go into deployment, right? Like, is it going to make it? If it makes it, if it's already going to staging, production, Canary, and so on, there is no reason for you to think about applying the picking to 13.0 label yet, right? Release managers announce in the releases channel what is our current guaranteed commit that we will be deploying, right? In the releases channel, we always post when we are certain that something is gonna reach that. If your merge request is up until, like, within that, you don't have to worry about things. But if we are already past that deadline and things are, will they make it or won't they make it, the best bet you can have is in a day before the release, if your merge request is not inside of the GitLab 13 release, you're going to apply picking to 13.0 label because that's gonna go into a patch release. But the important part here is if it's a bug, if it's a regression, if it's a feature, features only get shipped in .0 releases, right? We have other requirements with our community edition, with our Semware following and so on, where we can't ship features in patch releases. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for walking through that.
So just to add to this becomes easier the faster we ship. So the more frequently we ship, the more frequently we deploy to GitLab.com, the less you need to think about when do I apply a label, is there a cutoff or not? But that is a collective responsibility. Like, the more stable we are with the code we are shipping, the less problems we are causing on any of the environments, including GitLab.com. The quicker we react to a problem, meaning if we can fix tests really quickly, if we can deploy really quickly, if we can build our packages really quickly, if the quality of all of that is great, we can deploy more frequently, which means all of these discussions we are having right now about cutoff dates and so on become moot almost. All right, who's next?
CZ.
Yeah, I just wonder how we use Canary. Is it just for safety check, or how is it just for experimenting some features that we are not quite sure to open to the public?
Yeah, so I'm gonna, give me one sec to find that doc. Just gonna link it very quickly for you here. So we have the general description of what Canary does in this document. So Canary is production environment. So that is important to note. We don't experiment necessarily. This is our way of, not only our, obviously, just checking out and seeing like the impact of the changes that we are deploying before we roll it out to everyone else. Usually what you have in other companies is you do percentage rollouts, right? Like you expose to 5% of the traffic, you expose the deployment that you just had. The problem is we can't do that because GitLab as an application doesn't allow us to have that separation where we use the same database, the same Redis instance, but then different code running at the same time. Like it's really not allowing us to do that. So Canary actually is only there on I think registry, web fleet. So everything that you see when you load the page. Then HTTP Git traffic, so cloning through HTTPS. And I think one or other two, API. So a couple of those things, which means that we are only using it as, are we seeing a huge amount of errors popping up based on the traffic we are generating? If we don't see any problems, we just expand it or deploy it to the rest of the production. But at the point where we reach Canary, we already ran that database migrations. So already the data set changed there. So that's also one of the reasons why we have all we're trying to have the tests to make sure that we do backwards compatible code. So we basically run with Canary ahead. The rest of production is behind when it comes to code, but they're all using the same data layer. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks.
Cool, welcome. All right, I think your item is also next.
Yeah, the next question also from me. I wonder whether we have the process of rolling back a deployment.
Yes and no. We do have that, but we've been told by the database team frequently actually that while we can do reversal of database migrations, the regular database migrations, when it comes to post-deployment and background database migrations, so those are the longer running and the ones that are affecting, in some cases, destructively our data set, they are not sure how that will work on GitLab.com scale. So to answer your question, we have a process for this, yes. The process is actually defined in this document. Give me a sec, I'll share it. Thank you, Ricky. And this process is basically, we're just deploying the older code in reverse. So we are first handling the stateless services, and then we roll back Gitly, which is a stateful service, and then we roll back the database migrations, right? So we have that, and we've done it once or twice, but we've been generally warned, or we've been generally advised that we should always roll forward. So whenever we have to actually do a rollback, what we end up doing is revert the code that is offending and deploy again. So we continuously go forward. Whether that's the best thing in the world, I don't think so.
Thanks.
Cool. We are going a bit over time. I don't mind taking a few more minutes if you all don't mind as well. Cool. Steven.
Cool. I'm aware of the GitLab.com Kubernetes migration, and I'm aware of the videos and stuff, just wanting to get kind of the fresh status on it.
All right, I'll link the epic as well, so everyone else gets it. Like, this is all bookmarked, right? Like, it is literally like the thing that I'm looking at every day. Basically, right now we're at a stage where we are rolling out Sidekick to Kubernetes. So we spent a couple of months actually trying to ensure that we deploy side by side with our VMs. So at the same time, we build both for our Helm charts and our Omnibus packages. You're probably aware of that. And then we needed to connect the two, and we also needed to find a way to manage the risk of Sidekick jobs expanding, right? Like creating a large number of pods in our Kubernetes cluster, meaning how do we contain so it doesn't auto expand until infinity and then causing all sorts of problems there. We found a solution for that, and we were waiting for distribution and scalability teams to complete their part of the task on redoing how Sidekick is actually functioning before we can roll out the rest of Sidekick. We have a couple of blockers right now that we identified. So with our Sidekick migration, we will be able to probably migrate around 80% of all of our Sidekick workloads. The 20% that we can't are dependent on shared state. This means we have NFS, for example, in our VMs that are acting as that shared state. In Kubernetes, that can happen, right? They're stateless. And our applications, so GitLab features specifically, don't necessarily support stateless in some cases. So some of our customers are using this for a while now, the Helm chart and installation on Kubernetes. They're not running into these problems because they don't have the scale we have at GitLab.com. So we see these problems exactly because we are running at scale. So we've seen situations where a feature would buffer things on disk, fill up the pod would fail out of disk space. That would trigger a new pod in a node, and that would expand to fill the whole node. The node would fail then because it would run out of disk space. Kubernetes would trigger a new node, and then it would start triggering new nodes, and we would have a cascading set of failures. So right now we are focusing only on safe rollout of the Sidekick queues that we absolutely know will not have those type of dependencies. And then through a different channel, I'm working with development to remove some of those dependencies that we have, like some of the features we have. We have the model pinned down for how we are doing these migrations. So as soon as the application starts unblocking us, when I say application, I mean the actual application that we all develop. As soon as we start having that unblocked, we can speed up our migration with rest of the fleet, meaning we can do that for the API and for the web fleet. If the features that we depend on right now actually land soon, we might have all of the stateless workloads migrated by the end of this year, probably sooner, and then we can start talking about stateful things and migrating stateful things.
Awesome. Thanks for all that great context, Marian.
Cool, of course. Thanks for asking. All right, any other questions before we end the call? Cool. All right, well, thanks everyone for asking awesome questions. And
thank you very much for giving us that rundown. That was great.
Yeah, thanks, Mara. That was awesome.
All right, we'll do it again then. Have a good one. Bye.
See ya.
Take care.